Okay, let's roll. All right, guys, welcome to our Christmas 2019 show. This is certainly one of the few shows we've all been together at. But we're learning a little bit about our hosts, DJ Kevin Mega McFall and DJ Lori Branch, both house music pioneers. Actually, in our studio right now, we have another super pioneer getting ready for his show.
That's right.
But are we gonna we're gonna ignore him for 2 seconds and then
No,
we'll
we're
come
not.
back.
That's the problem.
We turn it around. Here we go. Look who we got here in the studio.
That's
Oh
right.
shoot, can we get her in?
Don't
What up?
Nunnally.
Okay, but you all are gonna hear a great show
The voice.
soon. But we've got these two phenomenal pioneers here who do a great job at hosting this show. And so, as we prepare for 2020, we're going to talk a little bit about, why you do the show. Why do you come up here every week or every other week now and do this show? Why is it important to you, Kevin?
So I need to first say that I, too, am an admirer of this woman sitting next to me, DJ Lori Branch, have been for a long time.
Long time.
Thank you.
And so part and partial to my motivation, right, is to be a collaborator with someone of her caliber. I'm also an admirer of our, as I call you, the super duper producer.
That's right.
Lauren Lowry, whose vision and affiliation with this great institution at Northwestern has enabled this opportunity. But from a personal standpoint, a purveyor of the culture, right? I've been a DJ, yes, but I saw the genre as so much more and pushed the business boundaries of the genre. I wanted to see the formal structure. I've always been a formal dude. I'm, that rigid, disciplined kind of corporate dude, right? And so I wanted to bring some of those elements to the genre of house. And so looking at it as it was emerging and evolving, I saw a gap. And that gap was, as we happen to have been just talking with Keith about, was that no one was helping to craft and shape the narrative. House emerged as this very track-heavy genre of music, but there were people obviously making these tracks. The creativity was pouring from the people, and the story about the people was important and was missing. Everybody was talking about the tracks, right? From Dance Music Report and Billboard, and it was all about the tracks. And so my mission became bringing the stories of the creators into that narrative in the various media outlets. And in fact, Keith Nunnally was the first client that I secured as the first house music publicist in the genre. And so this show is an opportunity to tell some of those stories, to have the stories told back to me, to again get the narrative out there and continue to sustain and support the culture and the history, which is so important because we are people who have contributed to something that's global and will be here forever.
Well, Lori Branch is the reason why I continued to have the show, by the way, so that the world knows. We had a show here 2015. Was it 2015 when we had that show about, we did a SimFest event about women DJs. And Lori helped us to curate that show. We had it at a place on the north side somewhere. And so I said, before we have that show, we should promote it. Before we have that event, we should promote it. So I called the people down here and said, hey, give me a show just for the night. And it was really funny because it was you and Terry Bristol, correct? And Charles came to interview them. And when we happened to go to Gramophone right before we came up here. I don't know, we were just giving some flyers to Mike Serafini. I didn't know Mike Serafini had a show. We go there. Well, he's like, where are you all going next? So we're going to WNUR. We're about to do a show. He's like, what are you doing a show? How are you doing a show at WNUR? That's somebody's time. I'm like, I don't know. Somebody said I could do a show. I'm going up there to do a show. You know, so the kids here were like, if Lauren Larry wants to do a show, we're going to give her a show. I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. So then we were like, me and Charles were like, let's do another show. Let's keep doing shows. He wanted to do another kind of show. I was like, no, I don't want to do that show. I want to do Vintage House. So he was like, well, I'm going to do my own show. I was like, okay, do your own show. I'm going to do this show up here. Right? So I started doing this show. Did it for about a year. And I was like, God, I'm tired of coming up here. I'm not coming back up to Northwestern. It's not happening. It's too much of a drive. And Lori Branch calls and says, out of nowhere, says, Lauren, I want to do a show. I want to do the show. I was like, are you sure you want to do a show? I was like, do you have an entire quarter's worth of people to do a show? And she gave me a lineup of 12 guests. I said, guess we doing a show. And by the way, I feel bad too because Charles Matlock then was like, well, if you're going to stop the show, then I want to do a show. I was like, don't trust you, Charles. I'm not going to do it. Like,
We love you, Charles.
We love Charles. Charles will do 5 shows and he'll disappear into thin air and Charles knows it. So I was like, Lori wants to do a show. We going to do a show.
Right.
And here we are all this time later. So I appreciate you so much.
Hey, I appreciate you.
Why did you want to do a show? Why did you, out of nowhere, decide to do the show again? And why to do it consistently, not just a show?
Well, okay. I will give you 3 reasons. One is in my blood. I think I may have told you this story, but when I was like 7 years old, I actually have this on video. My mom and dad were like prolific recorders of everything.
Nice. I love that.
My grand uncle was the first black DJ with a syndicated radio show.
Interesting.
He owned 4 stations in Chicago.
What's
He
his
was
name?
a millionaire in the 30s.
What was his name?
His name was Jack L. Cooper. Look him up, Google him.
Yeah,
And we have had that kind of, desire to document. My mom's a historian. My grandmother was a historian. Music, stories. I mean, they had shows, radio shows in 30s, 40s, 50s. And so I've always admired that, and I've always sort of had a little bit of that in my blood. And then when I was 7 years old, you could see my mom interviewing me on 8mm. She's recording it and interviewing at the same time. What'd you get for Christmas? I got a typewriter and a record player. And I have it. I mean, I include that in some of my mixes, that actual little sample. Because I like music and I like to think about stuff and to write about stuff and to document. And so for me, a radio show is kind of a marriage of the 2 things that I really love the most. And the other 2 things I'll mention, so that's one. The other one is that I love talking to people. I love the stories. And Vita Girl, who's just such a beautiful, up-and-coming DJ. She's so wonderful and smart.
Spirited.
She's great, and she's a smart girl, and she has coined this phrase. I hope, she's okay me using it, but she calls it sonic history. That we have evolved in our taste as a society. We like all the diffusion that has occurred. We had 3 channels growing up. You had, 5, 7, and 9, and 32 if you had good reception. But now we've got 100. And the good thing about our evolution is that we have space and capacity to hear more voices. So not only did you hear Motown, now you got stories about all the singers in Motown and all the backup singers and what happened in the studio. Like we're hungry for those kinds of stories.
Absolutely.
That history is important, right? And so I think house music is equally deserving.
Absolutely.
And this show is a vehicle to explore all the important people, who helped to create a genre that's worldwide. And to be in the center of that, or to be a participant who's helping to cultivate that, makes me very excited. The last reason I'll give is in one of our guests. I learned so much from the guests. We all have a story. We all have a story. We all came and left at some point and came back to it and left, So everybody's got their perception of what it is and why it was special. But our dear friend and collaborator, E. Smooth, coined the phrase.
E. Smooth.
That there's a house music culture and there's a house music canon. And part of this show helps us to separate those things. Like there was a culture that led to this sound, that was uniquely Chicago by Chicago artists that became the canon. And so I think it allows us to sort of bifurcate, you know, and compartmentalize those in a way that helps us be academic about it, to be scholarly about it, to create a timeline for the culture, for the canon, and to really see how they fed one another.
It was interesting, if I may, when you say that. I remember as a youth coming up, and remember we had the albums, and so it's more visual now, but back then I always read all the credits on the album.
Absolutely.
How about that?
I wanted to know who was the writer.
Yeah.
I wanted to know who did the background vocals, and we spent a lot of our time reading, and later on as making it in the music industry. I remember Luther Vandross, I was a fan of his. Well, to actually, when I was signed to Giant Warner Brothers, and I was in L.A., I had Nat Adderley, who played for Luther. I had Tony Maiden, who played guitar for Luther.
Wow.
I had Verdine White, you know, who played for Earth, Wind, and Fire, played on my album. You know,
That's
Everett
great.
Harp, the
Wow.
saxophonist, played on my album. So to actually experience that when only I used to read about it, but now, as you say, this evolution has occurred.
Right.
You can see these images
Absolutely.
of all of those things occurring, and it is very important, you know, because that's what we did then. We used to just, you got that album cover for the photograph,
Right.
and then read the credits.
To read the notes.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's
That
what
was
that's
so
what we
important.
did.
Right.
You know,
I
But now you
agree.
can see those people.
Exactly.
You can experience those people.
Right.
And
Right.
it gives that much more
Produced
meaning.
by,
you know.
engineered by, recorded and mixed at.
Right,
That's
exactly.
By.
right,
Oh, look at
Copyright.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
right.
That's what's up right there. We
I
got
know this guy.
artifacts.
You know we went to high school together.
You was a little.
I
Lim
know.
Bloom
I
Eagle.
didn't
We were in the same
school-
class.
The best
Oh,
school in
wow.
the history of the world.
We used to
by the
take.
Uh-oh.
We used to take wood shop and the bus, and I'd
Oh,
see
wow.
Steve every single day.
Okay.
The Morgan Park and St. Francis
Yes.
people in the room with
Right.
challenges.
Absolutely talented.
Yeah, we don't
What,
care
about
that.
house music?
No, about Lim Bloom.
About being the
Limbo.
best high school, you know.
It is the best high school.
Well,
and it continues to be
pretty good high
interestingly,
school.
yeah.
Man.
It was academically. It was a great high school.
Yeah.
You know,
No doubt.
Academia, definitely.
And,
Yes, it is, so.
and clearly, from a social standpoint, they're building a strong case too.
But you know, it just in terms of house music and Lim Bloom, we used to leave Lim Bloom. I mean, like there was a little clique.
Yep.
There was a
you had to
little
go
click.
away from.
And no, but I mean, it wasn't like you could go to Kenwood or Whitney Young,
was
and there was
there.
like lots of
It was
people
there.
who was into
Right.
the predecessors to that.
Punk out.
That wasn't happening at Lim Bloom when I was there.
Wasn't happening in Morgan Park.
It was
either.
just like a handful of
Just a
us.
few, yeah.
And Steve wasn't going to the gay clubs, but he was creating his own music. So there was this kind of parallel track of like house culture, house canon that was like happening at Lim Bloom with just a few people. Because I see those people now and they're into house music. So I'm like, where were y'all back when we was doing this in 1980, 81,
Well,
82?
some of that
you know?
house culture too back then was so covert or so underground that
Right.
some people
Yeah.
couldn't make it out.
But it
I mean,
happened
you
when
know.
by the time you were at Lim Bloom,
By the time I was,
we was
full
doing
fledged,
it
right? It was
because
serious.
the people who were before you guys were now DJs and in the clubs and all that.
But there were still things we shouldn't have been going to at 13, 14 that we were trying to get to because
That's
they were
how it
It's
was.
that
in the
coming
house
of age
music scene.
movement.
That's
Right,
what we did.
So
These,
you
some
know?
people couldn't make it. Okay.
these were the opportunities, right,
Right.
to come into your own and to discover and
Right.
explore.
When we were going to the warehouse
Get in
back
trouble.
then, we
sneaking
weren't
out
old
of the
enough.
house.
No,
None of us were old enough to get in the
Yeah, no,
warehouse.
you couldn't get in. You're not
But
supposed
But we
to.
were there. We got
Right,
in, though.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I think it was a small crowd. But anyway, so guys, 2020.
Yes.
2020.
Coming up.
Totally excited
New
about
decade.
it. New podcast is going to come out January the 1st. You're going to see some really fantastically edited episodes of the Vintage House Show. So stay tuned for those once a week for the January and February. And then you'll hear more shows. So what is in store? What do you envision for 2020? The kind of guests you're thinking about, people you've already entertained. What should we expect for 2020?
2020 vision.
I will let Kevin, you go first.
So clarity is absolutely part of the new decade.
Clarity. Ooh.
Yeah, putting more clarity. You know, breaking down some of the myths and the hyperbole, if you will, of the genre, and one way to do that is to bring in some of the platforms and the people who have really stood up these platforms to enable the stories to be told, the venues to host the experiences. Some of the record store owners and people who were selling physical records at the time. And then, of course, still interspersing those whose stories haven't really been elevated yet.
Absolutely. Same here. Ditto.
Is there more for me, or should I go to my next?
Now I want to get Honey Dijon on the show.
Yes.
When she
That
comes to
would be
Chicago,
cool. Honey Dijon.
If you would grace us, an old friend, with your presence, that would be great. We need an international,
I'm in the building for that show.
You got to be in the building for Honey
Building.
Dijon. And definitely some lesser known DJs. I think I got a few out there who we haven't. And some of the old school, like Steve Poindexter. Where's Steve?
Where is he
Where
at?
is he?
Those are the kinds of people we want.
Larry Hurd.
2020.
We're looking for you, Steve.
Critical. Yes.
Larry.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, Larry Hurd. And many others.
That's
Many
fantastic.
others.
Well, guys, the other thing I want to end the show with, again, I started the show with how fantastic these two radio hosts are. But did you foresee yourselves becoming radio hosts? Or I know you might have done that in college, because both of you kind of transform behind the microphones.
Natural transgression.
You think so?
That you transform. First of all,
Okay.
Kevin McFall operates so
Transition.
slowly in the real world, and as soon as he gets a mic in front of him, he's upbeat.
Yeah,
he's
he's got radio
raising.
voice.
He starts moving around fast and talking fast, and I'm like, who is he? Like, who is this guy? Like, you transform yourself. And Lori, how when I talk to you, you seem like you speak like a regular person of African descent. Interestingly,
I don't
I feel like
understand that.
I know. Just like a regular person of African descent
descent.
does not necessarily pronounce their words and syllables so clearly. You're very eloquent in the way you speak. And I don't
saying
hear it.
When I'm on the radio,
When you're on the radio, I feel
I
like...
get more Inglewood.
No.
I-
You
it go
sound
the
like
other
you
way.
should be on the radio.
Oh, okay. Well, the other way.
It's a compliment to
You're right. Because
like,
you,
which way do I go?
Yeah, exactly. Because you actually pronounce your words, and like people on the radio do that. Like on television, they do that a lot. You don't realize they're
Right.
speaking very crisply. It's something
Diction.
about this.
So
Yeah,
you
it's
can
just like,
understand what they're saying.
so is this something you thought you might be doing, and did you foresee yourself doing something like this? or
I
did
think
you
I think I inadvertently code switch all the time because I grew up in Inglewood and Morgan Park and Lynn Bloom and I work in corporate America. So, I think I have all those accents in me because that's
Right.
you should hear my 7-year-old voice. I'm going to play it for you one day because
That's
I wanna hear that. I wanna hear that.
yeah.
It's in the mix.
Yeah, I'm not even physically aware of it. I think it's just something that black people do, especially if you work in corporate America or you have to present
Yes.
or you have to, I used to give tours at the museum
At
and I
those
had to be
things.
very much, that away. I think it is what it is. I mean, I did phone interview with this woman who was African American and it was great. It went well. And then when I met her, she goes, I didn't know you was a sister. I was like, is that an insult or
I
a
know, you're
compliment?
like,
She's like, no, it just is what it is. I was
Right.
like, that's my phone interview voice, But we all do it, right?
Absolutely.
No, I stopped doing that a long time ago.
She's
but-
like, I don't do that.
No,
Yeah,
I ain't
no,
gonna
but
switch it for nobody.
I have said very often that one of the hardest jobs in the world is to be an African American in this country because of the capacity you have to have for that code switching piece. But to your point, mass communication is something that does excite me. So when I get a microphone and know that whatever I'm communicating is going to be amplified to a bunch of people, not just the people in the room.
Yeah.
But it's a
I'm
natural
in their jobs
progression
by
for
that.
who you all are anyway. You know what I mean? So to do radio wouldn't have never been far from the truth because of what you do.
Yeah.
To electrify an audience through your wisdom and your talents and gift to play music, blend music, because today everybody's a DJ.
Yeah, that's
Technology
true.
has.
Right.
But
Labels.
you have to be a class act DJ to know how to blend. You know, not slam. I'm talking blend, where it's so
Seamless.
it's seamless. It's unconscious. You
Yeah.
know, it's when it occurs, it's like, whoa, I didn't even hear that coming in, and
Right.
it takes you to a different stratosphere.
That's nice, right?
And that's kind of what you guys have always been. So to gravitate to the radio, I mean, it's like an obvious thing for me to see them do it
Well, thank you.
because you all were already there.
I appreciate
know what I
you
mean?
saying that. No, I
I
enjoy
agree.
it.
That's
Yeah.
I
it is
once,
nice.
And I live 10 minutes away, so that helps.
Yeah. That commute, and in fact, a little reveal. For 9 months, I was a traffic reporter.
Are
Yeah,
you kidding?
believe it or not.
Wow.
I only, CLTV,
Oh,
GN,
wow.
and there was
come- I
one
think I
hit I
kinda
got on
remember that.
NBC5.
I kinda remember
Wow.
It
I don't
was
remember that at
it
all.
was a blizzard, and they came to the traffic production center and asked about how intense is this storm and what's it doing to traffic and should people stay home. I was like, yes, yes, and yes.
Stay home. Well, guys, thank you all so much. We really look forward to 2020. It's Christmas. Enjoy the rest of your Christmas evening. We're also going to be here next week. Lori Branch is going to have a special guest for New Year's Day. We don't know who it's going to be
It's a
yet.
mystery guest.
Stay tuned to her Facebook page for more information on that. And we look forward to seeing you all in January of 2020. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Look forward
Merry
to
Christmas and Happy Kwanzaa.
an unbelievable J.M. Silk reunion. And our boy is here, too. Hey, Louis Green. Thanks for coming out.
We're going to come back on January 1st.
Yeah, maybe we will.
Texas
Bye.
City is gonna be here.
Yes.